All right, so it's great to have everyone here for another MESHWORK CPD. I am really excited about this one. So we've been following Claire's research with Richard as well for a while, and we've had probably 2 CPDs on the research you've done so far.
Yeah.
But it's really great to see how far it's come. But Claire will be covering her FLOURISH model and everything she's done with the Putney High School and now with the Putney Junior School, and touching on SEN research as well. But it will be really interesting to hear more about your FLOURISH research and where it's taking you in the future. I think we're all excited to hear what's next and learn a little bit more about biophilic design and how we can improve sensory stuff for children in school and at home. I think that'll be really exciting for all our members. But yeah, before we get on, I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping things. So the first thing is, throughout the presentation, if you just leave your microphones on mute, that'd be great. But at the end, if you want to ask questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and we can ask questions and have a bit more of a discussion at the end. If there's questions you're thinking of through the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat box. I'm happy to read them out if you don't feel comfortable reading them out. And the webinar will be recorded and will appear on YouTube and MESHWORK afterwards. This is for people who are watching on YouTube or for those of you who are new to MESHWORK, but I just wanted to quickly explain what we're trying to do here. So MESHWORK, for those of you who don't know, is a community for people who are interested in sustainable design. We're really here to facilitate education through the CPDs we create, enabling you guys to meet new people, and to carry on the conversation afterwards. That's really where it was born from. We're looking at doing some really cool things over the next few months. As you may have seen, we've had some MESHWORK specialists join, which has been great. So we've got Graham, Andy and Frederick, and they're all covering different areas and providing some really useful blogs for you guys, and also be there to help answer questions and queries on the site. But yeah, we're nearly at 1,000 members, so if you know anyone else who will find it interesting or useful, please do feel free to pass on the link and get them joining in some of our CPDs. We're going to be covering embodied carbon next month, so we've got 2 really interesting CPDs. We've got a great lunch and learn as well, so keep your eyes peeled for those. I'll be posting them hopefully later this week. And then for any of you who don't know what Mesh Energy is, so Mesh Energy is a renewable energy consultancy. It's based in Surrey, but we work on projects all across the globe in the UK. Primarily, we work with design teams and architects to make the sustainable design process as simple and as cost effective as possible. I think we're particularly focusing on net zero design over the next few months as well. So yeah, if you've got any interesting projects, feel free to get in contact with Mesh or Doug. But that's everything from me. I'm now going to pass on to Claire, and she's going to share her screen and go through her awesome research.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just seeing if it can let me share the screen.
Perfect.
Okay. I just lose this, sorry. Move this out of the way. I hope that's not too disruptive because I could put it on a full screen. So thank you for everybody for joining me today. The aim of this talk is meant to be relaxing, and it's also meant to be a bit of a catch up, if you've seen my talks before, of what we've been doing. And my whole aim is to completely just give away the knowledge. It's not that you need me, it's the aim is to share knowledge. At this critical time that we live in, if we all share what we know, we can make a difference. And that is the point of this talk today. So just seeing if it will change. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Clare Bowman. I'm an architect and sustainability advisor for more than 20 years. But I also teach architecture at De Montfort University, and I'm now a visiting lecturer at the University of Kent on the subject of sustainability and biophilic design. And everything you see at Putney High School was actually in collaboration with my husband, Clare Bowman, at Mesh Energy. We did this, it's been a long road together, and it's really nice now because we can also say we're now working on projects again. We're taking this into more schools together as a collaborative approach because of the data that we now have. But I would be nowhere without Putney High School and the junior school and their help, and also Professor Derek Clumes, who has also published my methodology for biophilic design in his latest book, this book published here, but also my approach to sustainable architecture. So everything I teach is in this book, and everything you're doing today is actually what I teach and was teaching yesterday in the university. So really the talk is about inclusive comfort for everybody, all ages, wherever we are. My talk is very much about education, but everything you see applies to you at home, at work. And it very much comes down to this one sentence: we live through our senses, and the value that can bring to our lives. Sorry. And also sorry, it's jumping a bit. Sorry, I'm just going to go back. It's slightly jumping as I turn. So I put this picture in just to draw breath, to look at what nature gives us. Something that happened in our research at Putney was that we found students moving plants towards them, and particularly in the exams. And it's actually how we can use nature to calm us, particularly at the time now, and as students move into anxious times of exams where they've missed a lot of education. It's just how we can use the patterns of nature to calm us. Sorry, it's just very jumpy today. There we go. But what's not changed in our research is the following of the 14 patterns of biophilic design. I understand there's now 15, but actually I have this next to me, you know, on the wall. It's about thinking about all aspects that we can use to create a more sensory environment. But also you're going to see a lot about nature and space and natural analogues in this talk. But what is also really important is the mystery, the risk and the peril that we can bring into our lives and children's lives. That is also an essential part now of the work that I'm doing. So the Flourish Wheel for Wellbeing. So established actually for workplace and measuring workplace. This is common in BCO guidance, which is the British Office for Councils. This is where this is placed. This page that I have here is actually what I use with students. You can easily print it off and use it as a mind map when you're either designing spaces or thinking about your own home or any environment. You can use this to really look at the important aspects of a design. And what we found is that this is essential now in every project I do. So I think it's actually my phone, apologies. So the first part of the study did look at nature in space at Putney High School, and many of you have seen this before, so I'm just going to touch on it lightly. With our study, we found that 1 plant per 6 cubic meters was the amount of plants you need in a classroom to create fresh air. And that became consistent over a fuller academic year. We were seeing this clear 10% improvement in the space. And we have published, and if you look on Putney website, you can now see our plant guide for schools. So this clearly sets out all the plants we use there, and also what they do, what they remove from the air and the benefits. So this is we're now 3 years. And so what we've done is our sort of top plants for schools, top plants for the home. These are the ones that not only thrive in an environment which sometimes might be dark with fortnightly watering, but also they're the plants that have babies, which was the school we're keen about, because we've now got plenty of plants in the infant school that have benefited, that have been grown in the high school. The other most important element of our study was this freshness, how plants provide a fresher environment, and that is so essential for bouncing back. So in any environment that we're in right now, it's just thinking how we can use that nature to bounce back. It's also why it's important for us to go for walks at lunchtime, to actually, if we can, walk in a natural environment, how that will help us bounce back, that restorative benefit that we're looking for. But with this study, what was critical and what has become even more critical was during our study, we turned the ventilation, which was natural, to 750 parts per million, because we knew this could improve decision making and create a more fresher environment. Because we were doing this, when COVID arrived, I literally sent an email to the school and said, can we take this approach across the school as fast as we can? And this was sort of January time. And the estates manager took that really seriously and he implemented it. He started to open windows, and where they had this ventilation, they started to use it. They changed everything because we knew what we were doing. And then within 2 weeks, the BBC actually had it as a headline news: change your ventilation rates as low as you can. The scientists say this. So it was really nice for us in this occasion to be slightly ahead and understand what we were doing. But I would say the biggest change that this also made was the summer. In the summertime, when it was actually it was 27 or 28 outside, it was very hot. I'm feeling quite hot. But actually in the class, we had a comfortable 22 without opening the windows. This is just a passive ventilation system. So it actually created a calm, cool environment with the plants. And that bigger study, and what I shouted out so much from it was that actually what we used at Putney was the existing landscape between the Putney Hill and the school. We have this natural 15-metre buffer. And I was already noticing, because I did handheld readings as well as fixed readings, I'd already noticed a good air quality improvement. But between March and July, I took readings every 2 weeks at the site, and every 2 weeks those readings were the same. We were getting this constant 23% improvement with this natural buffer. And then within the school, with plants, we were getting an astonishing 58% improvement on this high street without putting an air handling unit in this building, without all of the things we're saying we should do to buildings. We were doing it with nature. And that's important as well, because in London now we have the urban greening factor. So the London plan, you can look this up, and they've got really clear guidance on when you're looking at new projects, or even if you're looking at a site now or your own home, you can look at the urban green factor guidance and actually calculate the amount of nature you should have around a site. And so it's great to see that since we started this, it's now mandatory in London to create these improvements on new projects. But as I come to and I will come to this at the end, but the school is very much we've got to a kind of rule of 1 plant per child now. So it's 1 rosy per plant we look for at the school. So the second part is not every school can have plants. But so we introduced the murals, and this is the natural analogue. So it was actually looking at the materials of tables. These were already in the room. The carpet, everything was in this room. We simply added the murals first. The plants came along later. And we saw the difference that this was making to the children, and also it was to the teacher. I've given talks in this room, and it is so easy. You just sort of sing to these bluebells. And that's actually how the teachers describe it. You just said, I love being in this room. I love teaching in this room. And it was also really nice. I witnessed the actual girls starting to see the connection between their A-level books and nature, and actually then beginning to use the plants to hide behind while they were enacting the pieces that they were reading. Sorry, I'm just jumping a bit. The other thing we didn't expect, and it is, sorry, I apologise, this is very jumpy. So after our first study, we actually were given a small amount of funding that the school had to add more plants. So what we did was we added them to the shared places. So we put them in the library, the art rooms, so that everybody could enjoy the plants. And so what I recommend is really big plants, so that they fill the space. And also it was how, and I will admit that the art room was where, if a plant wasn't very happy, it went to the art room because it's the room with the most light. So again, this became like a little mini nursery. But it also started to make this connection between inside and outside. What we didn't expect was the next page, which I'm trying not to jump, sorry. Sorry, it's jumpy. It's jumping a mate, sorry, apologies for this. I'm just trying to see the most subtle way to go to the next page. It's this page. So what we found as well was that the girls started to draw the pictures. So this is actually year 11. So these are 15 and 16-year-olds. And they started to use the plants in their coursework. And the coursework was introduced as well because of lockdown. So this was giving the activities for the girls inside and outside the school. But these ones were done as part of some coursework to help them progress. But it was lovely to see them actually using the real plants that were in the classroom that we placed there. The next stage was that at that moment we had actually been awarded Chelsea Flower Show for our research, but that was cancelled, and we had the carpet, we had all the materials, we had everything to go to Chelsea. So many of it was sponsored, so we looked at a space where it was going to be and looked at how we could get that in place before the girls came back. So we chose this sixth form space, which was, it's a mixed use space. It needed to be open and flexible, but it was actually quite noisy and actually quite dark. But a lot of the students I was already studying would study in this space on their own. You know, 1 or 2 students would study in here because it wasn't well used. But essentially we started to look at the comfort in that space. So we looked at changing the floor finishes. And although this is just a vinyl, the combination of the vinyl and the carpet and the acoustic ceiling was enough to change the way this space was behaving, just in the natural comfort. We brought the stand that should have gone to Strelsey. It went straight into this space, and it's a flexible space, so you can move it around, because many of the teachers were really worried that suddenly they wouldn't have this big useful space. But what accidentally happened is that we were able to create these natural spaces for 2 or 3 people to work together. This space required no signage post-COVID. It just naturally created social distancing. And then the next layer is we might have cleaners at one table, students at another, a teacher giving a one-to-one lesson at a different table. So we found this room had many uses, and it's now become very well loved, and we've recently added the artwork. What I would say is on the first day that I just placed the plants there before the pupils came back, a squirrel ran in and just had a little run round and had a look. And I was like, wow, it's already happening, nature's coming in. This sounds passionate, but this room is so well loved. It's such a nice space to be in. We had the Times came and visited. So I'm just trying to calm. So we had the Times come and visit and do an article, and we set up a workshop for some students to take some photos. And then we had the BBC came for a day and filmed with the students. And this was quite moving because these students hadn't been in this environment. They'd been at home during lockdown. They came in, we'd set it up to look nice for the filming. But what happened is the students just came in, sat down and started drawing and making plans, and they didn't move for the day. They just sat there, and they were very emotional about being there and enjoying the spaces and the difference it was making. This film is available on BBC iPlayer, and it's part of the Chelsea special. And that you can see the children, one of the girls said, it just feels like home when I walk in, which we couldn't have wanted for a better reaction. We then took the stand to Chelsea, and this is the whole of that room moving to Chelsea in literally 3 days, with a lot of support from a number of sponsors and helpers in the school and teachers. And then what actually happened, it felt like Putney was at Chelsea. what we didn't expect was how many people had watched the film. So we were overwhelmed. We gave away more than 10,000 guides for schools. So we made this simple leaflet to hand out, and we gave away an enormous amount, but we were inundated, and we started a comments book, which I'm still referring to. So, and it was people wanting to engage with this site, how they could do it in their schools. So that's where the plant guide came from. But the biggest conversation we were having was how it felt and how this could work in different environments, whether it be healthcare or more sensory environments. And also, I have to admit, it became a refuge for people in wheelchairs, and we actually ended up shutting the stand only for wheelchairs and school teachers in the end, because it was so busy, it just became this little bubble of calm amongst the busyness of Chelsea. The publication is now widely available. If you want to see any of the research at Putney, it's actually on the GDST website. But also, I would say in it, it's got all the ways we did it. So if you could utilise our research in your own work, please do. We put all of the guidance notes there. We even put the checklists. And as I've said, the plant guide for school is on the school website. Now, this is actually what I was hoping to talk about. So that was a big introduction to what we did before. At the same time that we were working at the school, we started to turn our attention to two infants' classrooms. And with everything that the school teachers were seeing at the school, we were able to take up a notch our research. And this is ongoing research at the moment. So what we were looking at was how we could use nature to inform the way we design in a spatial way. And that leads right back to the golden section, the Fibonacci sequence found in nature, and how this could calm both teachers and pupils, and the impact of that. And it was really nice because the school were really interested in how this would work. And so this project became an absolute merge of minds. It was teachers versus myself, and we were looking at it head on from two different perspectives. These are actually the classrooms, the two classrooms that I was looking at. And as you can see, they're quite happy, they're quite busy. But at the moment, even if you're trying to design a school or you're refurbishing an infant's classroom at the moment, it's very bold colours. Furniture comes in different heights and shapes and sizes. So we really stripped it back to starting with a wet and a dry area. And apologies, I've slipped. And then we used the same questionnaire that we created for the Putney High School. We used the same questionnaire for the staff. So we looked at standard Arab bus methodology mixed with NHS guidance for comfort. And we used against the FLOURISH model. So we looked at all the same things. We asked them all of these questions, and they were really positive about the spaces. Although they're challenging spaces, they're busy spaces, the biggest issue that came out of it was headaches and the amount of headaches that teachers had. And so we looked at what could be causing that. So the next study we did was, and this is really good if anyone on here is looking at early learning design, is that we did observational studies. And Richard will correct me because I always say this wrong, but it's the Laverne scale for well-being. And this was developed, and again, you can find this online, and it's a way of observing very young children and actually be able to measure their responses in the classroom. So to give you an example, a level of engagement is a poor level of engagement can be a child that is unhappy, maybe even annoying another child, or even hurting another child, just fairly distressed. That's a very low level. But the highest level that we can reach is actually a child humming to themselves while they're working. So if there is any of you online and you've seen your children humming while they're working, that's a great space that they're in. So this is perfect for anybody to use as a design school in an early learning environment. We did use this on the secondary school, and it was harder to read, but actually just the sheer being in a room and observing made a huge difference. Doing this at the same time I did this, I was actually, I purchased an acoustic, a noise sensor, and I realised I started to count the amount of times a door was banging and that every time the chairs were moved, they were screeching on the floor. And by about 20 minutes in, I had a headache. So I realised that it could be acoustics. And that's what we discovered. It wasn't air changes because it was COVID, all the windows were open. It was actually noise that we believe was causing the headaches. So what did we do? So the first step was the client's brief. So they actually gave us these pictures about how you could break up the room. So when we went into this room, it had lots of extra bits that had been added to it. But what they were key to do was have these key areas: making, maths, reading, carpet. So carpet is really the screen, but it's also construction play, independent play. So they were looking at something that could create these clear areas, these nooks, and for different children to work at. And we overlaid that with the FLOURISH model. So we were looking at a set of principles that are set here, the ones that we are all familiar with: natural daylight, views to nature, use of plants. They were really, really keen on bringing plants in. And this was sort of our checklist. But one of the biggest ones they were interested in as teachers was the removal of colour, and actually just focusing on natural materials and as much white as possible. And then we would test it. We would just start with a blank canvas and start to adapt the space. So, and I take full credit to all of my students at DMU for this page, because this was designed in the middle of lockdown, and my students had discovered it was almost become something to work with while they were studying online. We started to use the nature of design and the Fibonacci sequence more as we were teaching remotely and you couldn't be with them. So I actually brought it into this project, and I set the two classrooms up to be exactly the same as each other and mirrored. And then we actually placed existing furniture and new furniture to create these series of spaces. So in particular, the maths corner, the reading calm corner, and each table had a clear use. But it was very simple, and also it could be moved in the future, but this was our benchmark. This is also a drawing that I would call a COVID drawing, because there was no furniture available. We had to work with what was available. We were also working at a really financially challenging time in the construction. So we worked with what we had, what we could buy, and best practice. And the best way I found to explain what we were doing to the teachers was to teach myself SketchUp and actually create these little 3D visuals, so they could just see how new furniture could mix in with old furniture. But what was really key in a sensory level was from some of my students, particularly one who has autism. He's an architecture student, but he explained how spaces are noisy, and that lines and levels, his mind will need to count everything in a space. So we took that on board, and we really focused on this lower level, which is just 550 off the ground, which is a child's level. So everything for the child was at this level. The next level was their standing up investigation spaces. Teacher's desk, there would be 7 notice boards. There were, I think, 9 lights. It was quantifiable, but it was also really, everything was placed and thought out so that the mind could be calm. And these were actually pictures that the school supplied to me. I didn't choose them, and I mixed them with a colour palette. So we went from this very, very busy space to a space like this, which is much calmer and lighter. And as you can see, there is existing products we had, there are some new items, and there is an awful lot of IKEA, because it was available and it was in our budget, but it's also flexible. What we've said in the future, that might move somewhere else, but it was again a way of us testing the space and seeing. So the investigation area, everything, they just tried to switch from plastic to wicker and wood, and it's very touchy-feely. This was actually, my mother recovered this. So again, it was reused and repurposed rather than buying new. Apparently this corner is very well enjoyed. But it acts as 2 points. It's not just a reading corner, it is that reflective, quiet corner. So what we've discovered, I think Mr. Page. So I'm just checking. So yeah, so what we've discovered, and even looking at these pictures, these were taken in the first week back of school. So this is the children moving in. And when I first looked at them, I thought, well, they don't look very happy. But then I noticed that how independently they seem to be. They're all getting on with their different activities. And particularly this. And so this is, if you just take a moment, I'm going to be quiet. This is actually what the children wrote this week back to me today. They've sent me a message. So this is what I've just received. Okay. And as we go to the next page, and this was the feedback, and I actually had this feedback straight away. I popped in when we were doing Chelsea. I just said, how's it going? And the teacher just said, within the first week, the girls were independent in the space. They're 4 years old and they knew what to do. They were going in, they were doing their coats, they were getting on with things. And she had a really big smile on her face, which was great at the end of a busy week. But this is what the head of years has just said today, that this is their professional opinion of the spaces. And what I would hope is, although this is an independent school, what we've done here, we spent no more money. We used the same materials, the same equipment. We were just smart, but it was actually working head on with teachers in their space that made a difference on this project. I haven't been back lately because of COVID, but I hope to go back. And I just wanted to show you the spirit of the school, because what happened is over COVID, there were lots of babies born, which I had at home. I took them into the school, and it was actually the juniors reception said, we'll have those. And the reception is basically reception, and it's a nursery for the babies. The babies born throughout the schools come back to the junior school. They're grown, potted on, and what you see here is a mix of those and some of the plants that we had at Chelsea. And it's the spirit of the girls that they now, apparently they're out with their misters, they've got watering Wednesday, and they've got a real culture of the plants has become a big part of the school. And as you can see, this again was taken last week. And as I draw you back to this image as well, is that I am not an expert on special needs, but I think it's actually through my students that they've helped me realise, even in the studio where it's too noisy, what we need to calm ourselves and calm our children in challenging times. And one of the links that it was actually one of my students found is this incredible woman called Dr. Magda Mustafa, and she's in Egypt, and she set up a website which is a real go-to place for learning about sensory design, and she set up these aspects for architecture, and she talks about a series of key spaces that you need to have in your designs, and I'm going to let one of my students pages show you that. So this is an extract from our website. So if you go to it, it actually, people are now putting in their case studies, so you can look throughout the world at projects. And if you go to it now and it's not quite right, bear with it. I think there might be a blip able to read each one of these case studies. What's good about it is it looks at all ages, and they've done some particularly good work with universities and higher education, and some of them are in England. So again, it's about, with our children, we want them to thrive, not just in early learning, we want them to go to college, and we want them to thrive at university. And we also want to ourselves thrive. So it's how she's brought all of that together in one amazing website. So full credit to her. The other person, and then this is one of my students studied her page, and this was the page that she came up with. And I'm not going to say anything. I'd like to give you time to just have a look at it. These are the key values that we should consider in design for autism. And I think this, perhaps we could put this page up, Catherine, on the page. You know, I can give this to you to go on your WESH page, because and put some links to that. Sorry. But there's again, I cannot take full credit at all for how biophilic design has become part and parcel to the way we work as architects and interior designers. Oliver Heath has led on that. He gave talks, you know, 5 years ago, and he really has communicated how we can bring it into our lives. And what I'd like to do is actually share a video that he's made about designing with autism, which is, and I'm going to pop that on now.
Biophilic design is a set of principles that can be used to improve the human connection to nature in the buildings that we live and work in. The brief for the design of this room was really that the children experience a lot of stress when they're in the playground. There's nowhere for them to retreat to. There's noise, there's confusion, there is activity, and the children were just getting overwhelmed. So we were asked to come into the garden school and to create a space that would be calming and restorative and help them to recuperate, to enjoy looking out onto the playground without feeling that they were going to be surrounded and overwhelmed by that noise and that activity.
I've seen in my experience working with them that they love to go outside and they love to learn by exploring different materials, and so to see them come in here and identify on a sensory level with the different features that are in the space was really exciting, and it's evident their enjoyment interacting with the space and using the different features.
Because we haven't got the opportunity to introduce real direct forms of nature into the space, the use of indirect elements of nature has been absolutely vital to create that natural feeling to the room. So we've used interfaces, carpet tiles across the floor, which introduce natural colours and textures, the greens, the different pile heights. Added to that, these cubicles uses interfaces net effect carpet tiles. And interestingly, the colour blue is long associated with a sense of calm and relaxation. So these little spaces are areas where the children can just tuck themselves in to retreat from the rest of the world. It even changes the acoustics when they're sitting inside them, and this amazing sense of calm and relaxation starts to happen.
The first time we came into the space, they went directly into these hexagonal cocoon-like shapes, and there's one particular child who every time she's come in, she goes into that space, and this is a child who actually seeks small, confined, dark spaces, so it was fantastic to see her immediately find something that fulfilled her need.
Simply putting window seats next to windows mean that when children sit and gaze out onto the playground, they're sitting in a space where they can maximise their exposure to natural light inside. But when the lights go down outside, we've got artificial lights within the space. We've used dimmable LED lights so that it can control the lighting levels. And in the interactive feature, we've got different colour changing levels of light. So when they press an interactive feature, lights change and noises come out of the speakers and the amplifier. There's all sorts of ways that biophilic design can be introduced into education spaces. It's not about spending lots of money. It's simply understanding and recognising the opportunities that we have as designers to improve that connection to nature, be it a direct connection, be it indirect in the use of materials, but also understanding our human spatial needs of the spaces that we're living and working in.
Okay. And just so, as I say, it's fantastic what Oliver Heath does and what he continues to do. And if you want to look at anything about him, it's on his website, but he also leads on an initiative called Planted, where he's taken both biophilic design and green infrastructure to a new level in London. And every year now they have a conference associated to that. And so this is the next slide, if I can get to it, is my last slide to just open. So I think I hope this is okay. You can hear me okay, Catherine. So this is my conclusion. For me, it's really about keeping projects and your work and your life and everything around is more nature-based, natural colours and materials, and keeping it simple. And that's the biggest thing I've learned. And so that's not just for us, but also for all children. Often they're not diagnosed till they're 19 or 20. So it's just really important that we consider all aspects, you know, of what we do. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you, Claire.
Apologies, there was quite a few technical, I was really struggling to tell a calm story there.
No, it was really, really interesting. Do you want to pop your video on and we'll do a little bit of a Q&A session at the end? You can stop sharing your screen and we can just have a bit of a chat. Nice. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to write them in the box. I'm happy to read them through. But if you want to ask any questions, feel free to unmic yourself and just ask them. But I just wanted to start off with saying I found it really interesting, your conversation around space and how it can be quite daunting for children to be surrounded in a space that doesn't support them. I found that particularly interesting, and the concept of actually looking at with children that have special needs or even ones that are shy, catering a space for everyone, not for those that just thrive in noisy areas. I found that really interesting, and I was just kind of wondering, like, where did like the special needs autism information kind of start? What was the first thing that kind of started you on that journey of looking at
it started in this room that I'm sitting in now, which used to be a den, and it started with our friend's son who has autism. And when he came into our house and he came into the hallway, he would talk so much, but he kind of was okay in our lounge. But one day this room, which you can see is green, we decorated it for the boys. It had a sofa, it had a TV screen and a window and a door, and he just vocalized that he didn't have autism in this room. And then he said, actually, do you know what, I'm just going to stay the night. And he just happily kept night. And that was like, wow, you know, that was to just see, and also just seeing his needs, and I'd seen him in school. And so to see him firsthand and to see him actually to calm everything down, and him be able to have not just and it wasn't just the fact that he could have a conversation with you, he could have a warm conversation with you, which is another big step. So, and then I also witnessed difficulties in the studio with students with autism or Asperger's and how the noise was affecting them. And it was actually through my students who are much older that were able to vocalize on what we needed. So we created a quiet space for them. But what I noticed from them was that they then created really excited schemes. When we created the right environment for them, they gave as good as they got. In fact, they went way beyond some of the other students on work for spatial awareness. So it's also about what the potential of any child. The big thing about why I'm being given the opportunity at the juniors was just the fact that we don't know what our children are when they go into a school at 4. We don't know anything enough about them, and sadly we don't know till they're in their 20s. Some they could be. I have one today. She's 21. She's being diagnosed today, but she's had to go her whole life struggling. So she's really relieved to have a diagnosis, but they're a long time coming. So the more we can do, the better, to make our environments more people-centered.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I remember being at uni and I was down in Sussex. So we had it's quite an industrial looking campus, and we would have one lecture hall which had no windows, and then this really nice one that had windows all along the top, and it was quite light. And the difference between having 2 good lecturers but having one in the dark room and one in the really light room made a massive difference, because the people's ability to sit through, some of ours were 2 hours long with a break in the middle, and you see the amount of people that wouldn't be able to make it through the end because it was so draining in comparison. You're in a bigger, lighter room, and the acoustics of it just travel better. People are more engaged, asking questions as well. So to see that even yeah, further on out of secondary and through where I can see it within my own life. I think that's really interesting. Okay, we've got a question from David. Says, has any research been done on houses and ordinary people?
Yeah, so I mean, there is research, and there was actually, it was David Donnelly had a really good book at Chelsea as well. And if I turn around, I should find it so I could put it on the MESHWORK. There is, in terms of research, there's a lot out there saying what good it does for our homes. But everything we've done, you can apply to your home. So don't think of it like it's just about schools. Everything, and even the plant guide for schools, work for home. The one thing I would say is there's a particular plant that's good for children's bedrooms and asthma, which is actually the peace lily. So putting a peace lily in a children's bedroom is a very good thing for that, for them. I have actually, so you can take anything we've done and place it into a home environment. And I would say I've just seen so I hope that answered that question. And for ordinary people, I like the ordinary people bit. So the other thing I would say is, if you can just bear with me, I'm just going to step out because my son has just got into a lesson, so I need to turn their mic off. Just bear with me one moment. Sorry, the joys of online learning. So the other thing about ordinary people is, I'm just going to hold up a book that I'm reading that I found called Walking in the Woods. Mm-hmm. And I really recommend this for anybody at this moment. It's actually got really big words in it. If you don't like reading, it's not a detailed book, but actually it talks about how we can introduce nature into our lives, and also the importance that is. And this goes right through to, it particularly focuses on elderly people, and it's all around Japan and how they've adapted Japan to create these short walks around the villages and the towns, so people who may not be able to walk so far have a destination, and the impact that maybe touching water or seeing trees has on them.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think, yeah, I can definitely see how the principles that you've created through your research can be relayed back into houses, with the simple things of how to understand and use space and how to include nature. It's interesting to hear about the peace lilies as well.
Yeah, there is the question on the offices that I've just seen come up, and that is, it's in the BCO guidance. The FLOURISH model comes from that, and actually in the latest BCO guidance, it includes the FLOURISH model for well-being. It's also now included in BRIAM guidance, but again, this can be taken into a workplace environment. You can take all of the, I mean, we took it into the offices in the school. So if you do, we're going to put a link to the plant guides for schools as well, so you can use those equations in an office.
Did you track how the staff reacted in the offices to the plants as well as the students?
With it, so what we found is when we had done what we call the Futures Hub, which is the Chelsea stand, what happened is that everybody started to organise their meetings there, interviews, any kind of interaction with people. They said, we'll meet you in the Futures Hub. And so what we saw is people migrating even to have their lunch in that space rather than the canteen. So, and we had teachers already, staff already had plants in their offices, but what we did last summer to decide to do, when they brought back all the teachers a week early because of exams, I literally started to pick plants up and take it to the offices, and we took the great big palms and we put them in the offices, and we brought other plants over. They were actually struggling in the heat of the summer, but actually what we found was it was what the staff needed. So basically they needed the plants to bounce back because they were in over the holidays. They were having to do, it was a very stressful summer for pretty much every school in the country. And we found that this was a bit of a distraction, but also it gave them the bounce that they needed. And the HR department looks like a jungle now in the school, but that's their love, they look after them. And we're not talking about many plants. It was very few amount of plants, but the difference they made to the staff was important.
Yeah, Yeah, I think definitely when life is busy, having simple as you've got to keep a plant alive is actually quite important and quite grounding.
So that's why we recommend watering windows. I'm just looking at the question on lighting. There's a big question on lighting.
Yeah, shall we quickly, Tony's just said one just beforehand, which is he was saying, how was the budget allocating covering plants developed, and did you consult with any garden centres or horticultural specialists to assist with the plant selection and their suitability for young children?
Yeah, so the first plants that we bought were a wellbeing budget. So they were our first, it was at we had some research funding. So the first plants we spent a few £100, not that, but it was for the first plants study and also the mural. And they were bought from a number of retail outlets, the first plants I bought. But what I do say is always look for a plant passport. So nowadays plants come with a passport, and that gives you the quality mark on that plant. So, but to develop the plants, to roll this out more in the school, I actually went to the Palm Centre in Richmond, where there is a lady called Rochelle there, and she is an absolute expert on plants. And we looked at the best plants together, and those are the ones that have not just been most successful. She has different species of spider plants that have lots of babies. So we only ever bought, you know, sort of 7 spider plants. We've probably got 100 spider plants now, but they're very healthy. So I learned a lot from her, and also the botanical boys in London who run workshops. They run terrarium workshops, but they also, when you buy a plant, give you lots of guidance. So between the two of them, they're my people that I use to study and get better. And then the plants themselves, I actually, because of lockdown, had to look after the plants a lot more myself. So I ended up becoming more expert on the plants.
That's really useful. What I just add to that as well is 2 weeks ago we did a CPD with Jan Stannard from Heal Rewilding, and she had a few links as well for people you can contact for good plant advice as well, ones without pesticides and stuff. So I'll have a look back at that, and I'll add that to the article and to the YouTube video at the end.
And I would say the RHS are very good. They've got really, whenever they, I mean, most of the people I found them at different RHS shows to begin with, or on the RHS website. So, and they've got quite good links linking you to your local area. But if you have a local indoor plant person, they're normally really good at, you know, helping you and supporting you as you start to buy plants.
Yeah. So, okay, we've got another one from Glenn saying, he was saying, would you agree fluorescent and CFL lighting should be avoided, replaced with LED lighting due to the fact that lighting is not constant and causes headaches?
That may have been it, because we took out through what were very cold fluorescent lights. And so I do tend to use, if I have to put in LED for when we have the dips, I put in an LED daylight warm tone. And what we found was we had hoped to do some circular ones and some fun ones, and found that they were extortionately expensive compared to the standard square LED light that we can all buy for about £32, and are very good for schools. Because so what we were able to do is we're using a standard an LED standard laying grid tile light in those classrooms, and that's what's helped. I would imagine has helped with the daylight. But what's quite nice is the walls also, we taking all the colour out of the room, we've got so much more reflectance, so the lights aren't on as much as they would normally be.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. And yeah, Glenn was just saying that he had a similar thing to me. It was like, with several lecture halls being really bad with lighting, and a lot of students are like suffering there as well. So it's quite interesting to see how it relays over a lifespan of people's educational needs.
Yep. Another thing, if you are teaching and on this, is our friend who's a teacher started to change her PowerPoints to having a bit green background for ADH as well. So it's actually, green is really, I know we use green a lot for well-being, but it definitely does work, not just in rooms, but actually for how you present work for children, sort of reading it and staying. And that was French, so it was French on a green background apparently does wonders.
Oh, good. Okay, so we've got one from Tony saying, did you consider artificial or preserved planting over real life plants? He said, I understand the positive effect of well-being is similar.
So I think so. The one thing that I do have, if you see, is we have dried moss. So we used they're actually handmade in Cheshire. So this is dried and naturally dyed moss that we have in boxes, and that's the only thing that we have that isn't alive. But we found that particularly when we were at Chelsea, people were drawn to it because it is just beautiful, and you do want to touch it. So that's the only artificial element that I would use, and actually we use the murals, which are artificial, but I don't. When I go into the shops where there's now a flood of artificial plants, they may be that they make some shops look fantastic, however they have no value, and there is something in, like, sitting right next to me now. This is a real plant sitting right next to me right now, and it's just had a baby, sort of thing. There is something exciting about that, and I do struggle that plants bring that fresh air as well. So I'm struggling with this use of artificial walls as well, because they're going to go in the landfill at some point. They are plastic, whereas plants grow and make more. So, but I wouldn't stop. We all have to make our own decisions. But I'm not an advocate for artificial plants. It's more the challenge of growing one. I would say, if anybody thinks that it might be difficult, succulents are another thing we've used in the school, which have loads of babies. Succulents are really low maintenance and bring an awful lot of what we call delight. So they're another way of bringing in something that may not need as much attention.
Yeah. Do you think as well with real life plants, you've got the sensory aspect as well? Because obviously with fake plants, they're going to have that plastic feel, unlike with real plants, they're going to feel, smell and act differently in the environment. Do you think that also has an added effect with how people feel with having them in the room with them?
Yeah, definitely. And nearly all plants flower at some point. And I think because we've all slowed down so much and we're looking at plants a little bit more if they're on our desk, you do see changes in them. And so at the moment, if anyone's got any plants, they're probably not looking at their best, because we're about to go into spring and suddenly things will happen. I would say orchids, never throw an orchid away, because they come back again and again every year. If you care for them, they will come back. They like to be dormant for a while and they'll come back. But I did learn doing this project as well to clean the leaves, and again I saw the plants bounce back. If anybody on this call has had, sometimes if you have an infestation, so like with the spider plants, if you think you've got a bug in a spider plant, I had some plants and you wash them, you literally drench them in washing up liquid, and they looked like they'd had their hair done. They just bounced back and they were all springy and popped up. So they're quite resilient. So if you have a plant that's looking a bit unhappy, you can just literally give it a hair wash, and that will get rid of anything that might be affecting it in terms of a pest, and it will bounce back. So plants do like a good shower, they do like their leaves cleaned, and then that's when they jump back.
That's brilliant. I think we've covered all the questions. I'm just going to end on what Patrick has said. Artificial plants are like decaffeinated coffee, defeats the object. That just really amused me.
I think there's a little one that says about suitability for children. So if I just say that, there are plants, it is worth checking what's poisonous, but somehow they love cacti. They're fascinated by cacti. So, and there is that risk and peril, but it is worth checking. Most plants come and say whether they're poisonous or not, and that's the thing you need to look for. But at the moment, we've not That's the main thing we look for before we put a plant near a child. Okay.
That's brilliant. That's all our questions. If anyone has any more, feel free to unmute yourself. But if not, we'll end it here. I mean, it was amazing. But I think everyone is fascinated with what you and Richard have achieved over the last few years. And it's really exciting to see where you go next. Hopefully we'll have you on in a few more months with some more updates with what you guys have done.
Yeah, and so if we can just, we'll send that link again so everyone's got the plant guide so they can get going. Okay.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'll end it here. If anyone has any more questions, I will be uploading the CPD later today. Feel free to pop some questions up there.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.